The guest house always felt loneliest at night. During the day, people came and went, patients from a nearby military rehab center, visiting family, staff moving in quiet routines. But after 10, the halls emptied and the silence settled in like dust. That silence had become familiar to me. I worked best inside it. That night, rain started tapping against the windows just as I finished closing the front desk. I was switching off the lamps when I heard the sound of uneven footsteps dragging softly down the hallway. Slow, careful. I already knew who it was. Liam. He stood near the doorway, one hand resting lightly against the wall for balance. His shoulders were tight, his face pale with exhaustion. The injury in his leg never bothered him much during the day. It was the nights that wore him down. "You should have called for help," I said gently as I walked toward him. "Didn't want to bother anyone," he replied with a tired shrug. "You're not bothering," I said, sliding my arm under his for support. He hesitated just long enough for me to notice, then leaned into me. He always tried to pretend he didn't need help. The room smelled faintly of rain and antiseptic. We moved slowly down the hallway. His steps were careful, measured. I could feel tension under his jacket, not just physical pain, but something deeper, something restless that never quite left him. "Nightmares again?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. Then, yeah. I didn't ask what they were about. Some truths were better approached when someone chose to open the door. When we reached his room, he tried to stand on his own too quickly. His knee gave out without warning. I caught him before he hit the wall, my arm tightening around his back. He let out a sharp breath, but didn't complain. "I've got you," I said softly. For a second, neither of us moved. His weight leaned into me more than he probably meant to. I felt his breath unsteady against my shoulder. Then he nodded once, short and embarrassed. Getting him to the bed took time. I helped him sit, then eased his injured leg into place. The rain grew louder on the roof, a steady rhythm that filled the space between us. As I pulled the blanket up over him, his hand shook slightly in his lap. "You push yourself too hard," I said. He gave a faint smile. "That's how I survived." I turned to leave. His hand caught my sleeve. Not forceful, not desperate, just enough to stop me. I looked back. His eyes were half closed, unfocused with exhaustion. He didn't seem fully aware of what he was doing, only that he didn't want to be alone in that moment. His fingers curled gently into fabric of my shirt. "Stay," he said quietly. The word lingered in the air. Simple, heavy. "I'll be right outside," I replied, careful with my tone. He didn't release me. "It's quieter when you're here," he added, barely above a whisper. Something tightened in my chest. I didn't sit on the bed or move closer. I just stood there, letting him hold my sleeve like it was an anchor. The rain pressed against the windows. His breathing slowly evened out. Minutes passed, maybe more. Finally, his grip loosened. His hand slipped away as sleep pulled him under. I eased my sleeve free. Before turning off the lamp, my eyes drifted to the photograph on his bedside table. A woman stood beside him in the picture, smiling brightly, her hand linked through his arm. There was warmth in her expression. History, promise. Rachel. He had told me about her once, in a passing conversation over late-night tea. A fiancée waiting back home. Long distance. Patient. Loyal. I switched off the lamp and left the room quietly. Over the next few days, small moments between us began to change. He started speaking more freely, sharing bits of his life before the injury. Training camps, deployment, the pressure of always being strong. I told him about my own quiet routines, the way the guest house became a world of shadows and stillness at night. Neither of us said anything that crossed a line, but something softened between us. A look held a second longer, a pause in conversation that felt heavier than words. One evening, as I helped him back from physical therapy, he laughed for the first time since I'd met him. It caught me off guard. It reached his eyes, and for a moment, he didn't look like a soldier at all, just a tired man finding a brief second of peace. "You make this place feel less like a hospital," he said. The word stayed with me long after I returned to the empty front desk. Late that night, I walked the same hallway again. The same rain. The same silence. His door was closed now. No footsteps. No call for help. Yet my chest felt heavier than before. Because somewhere between carrying him back to bed and standing in the dark outside his door, something inside me had shifted. I hadn't planned for it. I hadn't wanted it. But I felt all the same. The days after that night moved differently. Nothing had technically changed, yet everything felt quieter in a new way, like we were both aware of something unspoken drifting between us. Liam started coming to the front desk more often. Sometimes it was for tea. Sometimes it was for a book he didn't really need. Sometimes he just stood there, balancing his weight carefully, as if he'd forgotten what he came for. "You're hovering," I said once, half smiling. He rolled his eyes, was hoping you wouldn't notice. We settled into a new rhythm after that. Late-night conversations became normal. He talked more about the nightmares, never the details, but the feeling of waking up already exhausted, already braced for another battle inside his head. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't rush him. In return, I spoke about things I rarely shared. How the quiet of the guest house had once been comforting but had slowly become lonely. How I'd stayed because it felt safe to be unseen. How sometimes it felt like life passed outside the windows while I stood still inside. He listened the same way I listened to him. Carefully. Fully. One evening, a message pinged on his phone while we were sitting in the lobby. The screen lit up with a name I already knew. Rachel. He didn't open it right away. Just stared at the screen until it dimmed. "You should check it," I said. My voice was calm, but something tightened in my chest. "I will," he replied. After a pause, "Sometimes I don't know what to say to her." That surprised me. "She's been waiting for you," I said. "I know," he said quietly. "That's the problem." He stood up after that and went to his room without finishing his tea. That night, I lay awake longer than usual. I told myself I was worried about his leg, about his sleep, about his recovery. But I knew that wasn't the whole truth. Over the next week, he leaned on me more often, emotionally, not physically. When his therapy sessions left him overwhelmed, he came straight to the front desk. When the memories pressed too hard, he looked for me. "You make it feel manageable," he said once. I didn't answer. I was afraid of what my voice might reveal. The more he opened up, the harder it became to pretend I was only helping out of kindness. I started recognizing the pattern of my own thoughts. The way I waited for the sound of his steps, the way the quiet only felt complete once he was nearby. One evening, as we sat together while the storm rolled in outside, he spoke without looking at me. "Do you ever feel like parts of you stopped at some earlier version of your life?" "Yes," I answered softly. "All the time." He nodded. "That's how I feel with her. Like I promised her a future. I no longer know how to live." The words landed heavy between us. I should have told him to talk to her. I should have stepped back. I didn't. Instead, I said, "That doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes you human." He finally looked at me then. His eyes searched my face in a way that felt too personal, too raw. "You always know what to say," he murmured. That night when I stood to leave, our hands brushed as he passed me his empty cup. The contact was brief, accidental, but it lingered in my mind long after my hand had fallen back to my side. After that, it happened again, and again. Each time felt like crossing a line that neither of us could name. Rachel's messages became more frequent. He answered them less. Sometimes he typed long replies, only to erase them. Guilt crept into the space between us. I felt it in the way he hesitated before speaking, in the way I avoided saying her name. One late night, after a particularly hard therapy session, he sat at the edge of the lobby chair, hands shaking faintly. "I don't feel steady anymore," he admitted. "Not with my body, not with my life, not with what I'm supposed to want." "You don't have to decide everything tonight," I said. He looked at me. "I already decide one thing every night." "What's that?" He hesitated. Then quietly, "To come find you." The air shifted. I stood slowly, heart pounding, and moved a step back. "Liam, you're engaged." "I know," he said. "And I'm not a solution to what you're feeling." He swallowed. You're not a mistake either. Silence pressed between us. A few days later, he told me Rachel was coming to visit. The words hit harder than I expected them to. She wants to see how I'm doing, he said. She deserves that. Yes, I replied. She does. Neither of us smiled. That night, I stood alone at the front desk and realized a truth I had been avoiding, whatever this had become between us. It had already crossed into something dangerous. The day Rachel arrived, the guest house felt different before she even stepped through the door. The air itself seemed tighter, as if every quiet corner had learned to hold its breath. I watched from behind the front desk as her car pulled into the gravel drive. She stepped out carefully, brushing travel dust from her coat, looking around with a hopeful kind of nervousness. She was smaller than I imagined, softer, real. Liam was already waiting near the entrance. When he saw her, something in his posture shifted. Duty, memory, history all moving back into place. He welcomed her with a careful embrace. Not distant, not fully intimate either. Somewhere in between. I looked away. For the next 2 days, I stayed almost invisible. I did my job quietly. I kept conversations short. I made sure I was never alone with him. It felt like the only respectful way to survive what I already knew was ending. They sat together in the lobby one afternoon. I brought them tea. Rachel smiled at me kindly. "Thank you," she said. Her voice held no suspicion, no warning, just warmth. It made the guilt heavier. That evening, long after sunlight faded, I heard slow footsteps approach the front desk. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. "She's asleep," Liam said. I nodded. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The storm had returned outside, rain brushing the windows in tired waves. "I don't know how to exist between the person I was and the person I became," he said quietly. I didn't answer right away. Then, "Sometimes you don't get to live halfway between two truths." He exhaled slowly. "I never meant to drag you into this." "I stepped in on my own," I replied. He leaned his hands against the desk. "That night, you carried me back to bed. I'd already been losing myself. You didn't start it. You just made me feel safe while it was happening." I swallowed. Feeling safe doesn't always mean feeling right. He looked at me then, really looked. "I have to choose something. I can't keep taking comfort from you while pretending it means nothing." My chest tightened. "Then choose." Silence stretched long between us. "I owe her honesty," he said finally, "even if it costs me everything else." The words hurt, but I understood. "So do I." I whispered. He nodded once. "Thank you for not making this harder than it already is. Thank you for not lying to me." We stood there in the quiet until the rain softened and the moment passed. The next morning, I helped him down the hallway one last time. The motion was familiar, the careful steps, the slow pace, the weight he trusted me to carry. But everything inside it felt different. At his door, he paused. "I won't forget what you gave me," he said. "I won't either," I replied. This time, he didn't reach for my sleeve. Rachel left with him that afternoon. I watched their car disappear down the road until the dust settled and the empty space returned. The silence came back heavier than before. Days passed, then weeks. The guest house returned to its normal rhythm. Patients came and went. The nights grew quieter again. Sometimes I caught myself listening for his footsteps. They never came. One evening, as I closed the front desk, my phone buzzed. A message from Liam. Just a few words. "I still think of you sometimes. I hope you found your quiet again." I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "I did. I hope you found your peace too." I didn't ask about Rachel. I didn't need to. Later that night, I walked the hallway alone. The same rain tapped against the windows. The same stillness filled the air. But it felt different now. Not empty. Just quiet in a way that finally belonged to me again. I stopped outside the room that used to be his. The door was open now, the bed stripped clean, the lamp gone dark. Some people come into your life like a storm. They change the shape of things without staying long enough to see what they alter behind them. He had been one of those people. And as I turned off the last light and let the silence settle back in, I understood something that hadn't made sense before. What we shared had been real, but letting go was real too.